right, and away we go. Welcome to the latest episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley Engelhardt. I'm Matt Chernoff. Thank you for joining us as we go around the world of sports business. Got a busy show today. A lot of things to cover here, Hadley. I want to start, and I want to get to the masters in the business of Rory McIlroy in a minute, but I want to start with the unbelievable world of the transfer portal in college football. So I saw a number, Joshua.
Shockingly that you want to discuss that today.
I mean, I don't know how we escape it. Joshua Caraway had this number, that the transfer portal opened, and as we record this on a Thursday, the portal opened earlier in the week. He said once the portal opened, he said, I went and double-checked how many college football players are currently active in the portal, and as of midweek, 10,271. It's not a typo. 10,000 guys either looking for a new home or a new deal. 6,426 of them D1 players. 3,845 are D2 and D3 looking to move up. I mean, at some point you oversaturate the market here. I don't know. I guess this was going to happen at some point, but how do you reconcile this?
Let's put the numbers in perspective. There's a number of those players who are being cut, that wherever they are, at whatever level, the coaching staff after spring ball said, you don't have a future here, it's time to move on. And so that's why those players are entering the portal. And then there's a number of players entering the portal that are good players, that they don't see a true path either for playtime or financially with their current team, and are seeing what's out there. And you know, these numbers are alarming because the numbers are only getting larger. More people are entering the portal. And that's just football. We're not talking about basketball because that portal has opened up. And so it really is the Wild West. And it's, you know, everyone thinks the grass is always greener, no pun intended, because everyone thinks that there's more money elsewhere. And I know we're going to talk about the Tennessee situation. Yeah. And it's the numbers don't work, as you know. And the amount of players that are in the portal could field many teams. And so where do these players go? Most of them are done playing. Some of them are looking for new homes to either get more playtime, like I said, or try to hit pay dirt.
So there are very few Carson Becks, right, who can transfer to Miami. Whether the $4 million he got is real or not, there's talk that is an inflated number.
Let's go to that. There's no accountability. There's no reporting.
Right.
Nobody knows what anyone's really making. So when they report stuff, take it with a grain of salt, because that's what happens in our industry. So understand that number probably isn't $4 million, but it probably isn't $1 million.
Correct. So that's a fair way to put it. So when the Nico Imalilava story comes out, the Tennessee quarterback, who knows what's real and what's not? So let's just give you kind of what we think is real. And Hadley, I want your opinion on it. The first report was that Nico wanted a reported number of $4 million. Tennessee said, no, calling your bluff, not going to do it. And then the world came down on Nico because he's just the latest in a lot. Now, the timing of it is what people were upset with. I don't know what you've heard, but the story is that Nico doesn't have a true agent. The dad is handling it. Family members are kind of helping to be a rep for him. He's not without culpability in it, but he's still the kid, the player here who's taking advice from people around him. The timing is what ticked people off because it's in the middle of spring practice. He's trying to use the most leverage. So maybe it's more the timing combined with the money, and then it turns into, well, you're not that good to deserve that money. So what did you think of the timing of the whole thing?
I think the timing is terrible, but part of it is not his fault. Part of it is the NCAA's fault. The fact that we have two different opportunities to enter the portal is not great for the sport, not great for the schools. And basically what happens is players entered the portal at the end of fall and had an opportunity to go elsewhere starting spring. And it was kind of a tryout for both sides. It's, even though you negotiate a deal, you could leave at any point with no penalty at all. So players have gone through spring ball. And by the way, we're not reporting, but there are plenty of teams, colleges, that brought players in via the portal this past fall, went through spring ball, had an end of the season or end of the spring ball meeting, and told them, you don't have a future here. So it does work both ways. What actually happened with Nico, none of us will ever know unless he goes public and shares whatever he wants to share. The problem he has is he has family members involved. I think he has some advisors as well that are not part of his family, but it's a PR nightmare. And there's the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And we've talked about this with negotiating NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball contracts. There's a right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. There's leverage, obviously, but there's the PR nightmare. And Nico now has an uphill battle no matter where he goes, for whatever dollar amount he goes, because we're going to be talking about this all fall. And if he doesn't play as well as he's expected to play wherever he ends up, people are going to say, ha ha, I told you so. And so I think it was bad timing. It was bad advice. And you feel bad for the kid, because at the end of the day, even though we say, he's 19, 20 years old, he still has to make these decisions. And he has to realize that, the University of Tennessee will always be there. He won't. And he's not looking at the big picture of things and just looking at the short-term money. And there have been things about the offense. Sure. I've done the research. The offense, you compare it to UCLA.
Well, but to me, that feels like the family trying to say.
Correct. That's trying to save face.
Correct. So, but let me ask you this, because I want to talk about Nico, where the reports are he's going to UCLA, but the bigger picture. What you do as an industry is whether your background is in law, negotiations, you work your way up. Not to say that some family members or individuals can't negotiate their own deals, but this is the risk you kind of run, because the emotions get involved, right? More so than what you do. I'm sure your conversation with clients, whether they're college or pro, is, as hard as this is, we've got to try to take the emotion out of this and keep this as a business relationship. And it feels like there was probably some emotion that got in this.
Yeah, and listen, everyone thinks they're the Ball family, right? Because they did it internally, and everyone, father thinks, I can be that guy, and I have those qualifications, and my kid is that good. But at the end of the day, that's the exception, not the rule. The first thing they taught us in law school is you never want to represent yourself as a client, because then you have a fool for a client. And so it's important to understand that's why you hire the right people to negotiate. And the other thing about it is, people are saying, hey, NFL players, will use as an example, renegotiate all the time. First of all, they don't renegotiate all the time. They've done a long-term deal. They've outplayed that deal, and therefore they're now demanding more money based upon the marketplace. He hasn't outplayed anything, showed signs, but at the end of the day, if you look at his numbers, especially against SEC opponents, against Ohio State, other than 2 games where he played well, very pedestrian.
Sure.
So it's all on the come of where he can play. And again, if in fact he is making $2.5 million and was making $2.5 million and demanded more money, he's not going to see that money now.
Well, as the reports or the rumors anymore, I don't know what the difference is, that he's headed to UCLA and the number's around $1.75 million. How do we know? I have no idea. Those are some of the reports that have made the rounds. Didn't sound like there was a ton of interest. And to your point, there's a sort of a media backlash. There's a PR thing that I wonder if some schools weren't willing to take the risk on. It's odd that it's a school like Tulane, right, was like, no, we're not interested. There is the other side of this for Tennessee. You got to have a starting quarterback. And to your point, Nico was up and down, and there wasn't probably what they were hoping, but they also now have a big hole at quarterback.
Yeah, and by the way, there are going to be quarterbacks that enter the portal, so they'll be able to put a Band-Aid there. But Tennessee didn't create this. Yes, they have a problem, but they're not going to give in to his demands, because when do the demands end? It's a constant negotiation because of this constant free agency. The other thing we've got to talk about, and no one's really even talked about it, let's say he goes from Tennessee to UCLA. Tennessee, 0 state income tax. California at $1 million plus, 10-12% state income tax. So again, you've got the cost of living.
Sure.
All these different things that come into play that he is not being advised, at least on the face of it, being advised properly. And so, and we're going to have Jake Rosenberg on the air shortly, talking about former executive with the Eagles, now does some consulting for colleges and for NFL teams, and he'll talk about this, that this was created by the NCAA, by their lack of effort to get in front of this.
Yeah, there's no guardrails.
There's no guardrails. And even though we're going to have this settlement, hopefully it'll be done, hopefully by the time this airs on Friday, but that's going to, give you some idea of what teams can spend. But again, it doesn't put a cap on anything. It just allows teams to use revenue sharing as a source in addition to NIL collective monies.
All right, let's talk about one other element that's changed in college football, college basketball as well. The creation of the college general manager, that we're now treating these college programs as NFL organizations would. So everybody seemingly has added a general manager. But what we're also seeing, this has happened in college basketball too, we're using current players in assistant GM roles, which I wonder if it's window dressing or more. And the reason I bring it up, Raiders star defensive end Max Crosby has been named the new assistant GM at his alma mater at Eastern Michigan, the first active player to take on such a role with an NCAA program. Trae Young is doing the same in basketball as an assistant GM for Oklahoma. Terrence Mann of the Hawks is doing the same for his alma mater. Do you think we're actually getting work out of these guys, or is this just, hey, shake hands, take pictures, help us with recruiting, or is there more here?
I think it's more window dressing. I think it's more the recruiting, adding a name that's iconic with the university, iconic with their sport, NFL, NBA, whatever have you. And so at the end of the day, they're not evaluators. They're not ones, as successful as a player is, it's a different skill set in evaluating talent and seeing what somebody can do. They understand what it takes to get done, but the actual skill set is a different thing. And I think it's a way for boosters to get more excited about it, to raise more money, to help these programs grow. Again, these guys are still playing. They're working on their craft. They're working during the same season that these guys are working in. So I find it to be more window dressing. At the end of the day, you've got to let scouts scout and players play. And I think there is a new position out there for a general manager, not just with salary cap, because there's not true cap, but it's salary budgeting, we'll call it. But it's more about looking into the portal.
Well, that's what
really do advanced scouting, because again, you have to then value, all right, there's a player we want. What is the economic value we have for that type of player, that position, to determine whether we want to go after that player.
It's interesting you bring that up, because as they list Crosby's duties, Max Crosby will assist in evaluating high school transfer portal recruits, work with Eastern Michigan's NIL and revenue sharing budgets. Maybe it's a lot to put on the plate of a guy who's doing offseason.
And in his position, he can say, hey, this guy has a skill set that I have. Does he know anything about a quarterback, a wide receiver?
Is he watching tape?
Is he watching tape? Has he done it over the years? I don't think so. Again, I don't know Max personally, but I doubt it. And same thing with Trae Young. I mean, these guys are great at what they do, but being an evaluator of talent is a separate skill set. Not that they can't do it, but I think it's more window dressing at this stage.
Okay, so we will get to Rory McIlroy, who won the Masters earlier in the week. We'll talk about the business of Rory, the event itself. But coming up next, as Hadley said, Jake Rosenberg, who was once a VP of football for the Philadelphia Eagles, is now kind of working on the other side in the industry of helping college athletes when it comes to roster management, financial expertise, and just kind of establishing that whole edge of the business. We'll talk to him about that as Deals and Deadlines continues. All right, we continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley and Matt. We appreciate you guys choosing to make this podcast part of your day. I'll remind you, you can find the podcast on any podcast platform. Subscribe. It'll be waiting for you with new episodes that drop each and every Friday. And, of course, you can watch us, and why wouldn't you want to watch, on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, let's welcome in Jake Rosenberg. Jake transitioned from the VP of Football Administration with the Philadelphia Eagles to establish TAG, which is the athlete group, which brings high-level roster management, financial expertise, and industry connections to college athletics. It sounds like a lot to put on a business card, so we'll find out more from him exactly what it means. Jake joins us right now on Deals and Deadlines. Jake, we appreciate the time. How are you?
Pleasure. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So talk to us about the transition, because we've seen a sea change all throughout football, and I'm sure you saw where it was going. What made you decide to take this opportunity, this leap, and what exactly are you doing?
I took the leap because I thought it was going to be fun, and the ability to be creative and the ability to take the experience I got in the NFL building teams at the highest level, working with what I think is the best roster architect in the NFL, and turn my attention to the college landscape, where it's obvious there's a tremendous amount of change. There's not a lot of people in this space who have the experience or have really have any idea what they're in for, and the kinds of things from a top to bottom player acquisition, structural aspect that will contribute to having good teams. And I thought this was an opportunity in every way for me. I was ready for a change, I think, overall in life.
Yeah, I'll just share with you, Matt. I mean, I've known Jake for many years, and obviously negotiated deals and worked with him while he's been with the Eagles and watched them develop stuff. Jake, the interesting thing is, obviously we're seeing now that the portal has opened up again, and we talked about it earlier on the show prior to you coming on, just about how, this enables players to have really no commitment, and that they're entering the portal and asking for more money, and it's just a Wild West out there. What are your thoughts on, for example, what's going on at Tennessee, or just the whole landscape of the NIL portal together?
Yeah, I'd say staying away from the specifics of the situation in Tennessee, because I don't know all the dynamics. But player empowerment broadly across professional sports has been a trend that we've seen, whether it started in the NBA and players forcing their way out after teams were built around them, moving on to the increase in hold-ins in the NFL. And so I think as you expand into college now, you're seeing players are being compensated. And then the next step of players being compensated is players understanding that they have more leverage than they ever have before. They're, to some extent, hiring agents. Some of them are hiring fake agents, but what comes with that is understanding leverage. That's obviously something as an agent you make, use of when you have it. And so it's just kind of a natural evolution. I think the issue with college sports that everyone really has a problem with top to bottom, inside and out, is the rules are very fuzzy. And, in a lot of cases, there aren't real rules.
Correct.
So that's the issue. The thing that's great about the NFL, I think, that makes it as popular as it is, and I'm not saying it's a salary cap where people don't understand the nuances, but there's something to be said for everyone has the same assets, more or less. And, almost like everyone opens the same box of parts, and it's like, how can you make the best team, best robot, best, out of that? And there's something amazing about that. It's everyone's on kind of a level playing field, irrespective of the geography, whether you're in a small market, big market, everyone should have the same opportunity. And so I think as we get into college sports, we need at some point the knowledge that there are rules and everyone has a fair start, and then we all go. And that's probably the biggest issue right now, is just things are so unclear.
Yeah, and I'd even add to that, I think the one thing that's lacking that I think is important for this to be successful moving forward in college sports is transparency. The fact that there is no reporting, there is no agent qualifications. There's just, it's the Wild West out there. And so you don't know what to believe and what you're reading. And so it's important that I think, as this moves forward and the NIL is here to stay and the portal's here to stay, there are some guidelines set. And I know you're helping universities, create these personnel divisions and these departments that didn't exist before when it comes to the portal and salary cap.
Yeah, that's the basis of my business is helping these, front offices, if you will, professionalize. And I say professionalize in the sense that they've been doing things one way for a really long time. And when you're building your roster by allocating resources or assets, it's a completely different way to operate top to bottom. And, the overall number of players that they need to scout or evaluate has greatly expanded with the portal. So scouting function in college is nothing like what goes on in the NFL. So they need to build out a scouting department. It's very, very different than what they're used to when you have 85 scholarships that are all basically the same currency. You hand them out pretty evenly. That's a completely different way to evaluate than when you need to, correlate the evaluation with the valuation. It needs to be a lot more gray, a lot more gradients in there, and you need to understand roles and upside and all these types of things, which have never really been the case. There's just been a line, and it's like yes or no. And coaches are overloaded with things to do. Coaches, having been around and considering some coaches amongst my best friends, some coaches are great evaluators, some are not such great evaluators. It's a completely different skill set from coaching. And so these are just lessons to be learned. And my goal in terms of starting this company was to help them scale this learning curve faster, help them understand what skills and roles they need that they don't currently have, and how to evolve faster, because strategy in terms of building rosters is much more important than it's ever been. And so if you don't need to bump your head on every single low doorway as you move through, and you could learn some lessons and scale, I think there's a huge opportunity to be gained. And that's my mission overall, utilize my network in sports and try to help these teams go faster and smarter.
So let's follow up on that. And as Hadley and I talked earlier, there are over 10,000 kids who have entered the portal as of earlier in the week. And to your point, teams are trying and universities are trying to create an NFL-like front office so they can have some kind of better way to facilitate all this. University of Georgia, for instance, they're a holdout right now, Jake. They don't have a general manager. They're doing it, I'm not going to say the old school way, they're doing it a different way. So what advice would you give to schools like that who are, if not hesitant, are probably wanting to do it their way? Maybe Kirby Smart still wants to kind of run everything. As you just talked about, are there enough hours in the day?
I mean, I didn't get my second Super Bowl ring in here this season because I left, unfortunately, right before we won the Super Bowl. But I would have gotten my Super Bowl ring largely on the back of a whole bunch of Georgia Bulldogs. So one thing I would say is I don't have a whole lot of advice to give Kirby Smart. They run an unbelievable program, and I think Kirby is, what you and I would understand is a unicorn. And so when you have someone who is just completely in the tail and does things above and beyond better than the most, your model could be different and you could win that way. What I would tell most programs, they're not going to have a Kirby Smart. They're going to fit into that fatter part of the curve as they need to be better and smarter and more efficient and more specialized. And when most schools do have a general manager, which is currently the case, I think the function and the responsibilities and the power structure don't really back up the fact that they have a general manager, and they're not really making themselves significantly better. I think that what you will start to see is a assigning of the responsibilities and org chart much more consistent with the NFL, where a GM and a head coach are more independently reporting. The GM has more autonomy over the roster build, is not necessarily hired by, reporting to the head coach, because I think for this to really work well, the head coach needs to delegate things. There needs to be balance in this structure. If the GM is just a weapon of the head coach and is just kind of executing at his behalf, you lose that. And I think that push and pull in the NFL, that understanding that there's like this mutually assured destruction between the GM and the head coach. While the GM could pick players technically he likes and the coaches don't, why would he do that? Because they're not going to be happy, and vice versa. Like, everyone is dependent on winning and everyone's futures are tied in that way. And that's what makes it work. It's not the fact that one reports to the other. But I think those types of conversations and dynamics that occur in that level of specialization, I think is really important to get people back to doing what they're best at, why they were hired in the position that they're in. You go around, you ask a coach in college football whether, as part of his interview process, he was asked to evaluate a group of players and then they evaluated his scouting reports. And I think the answer is going to be soundly no. And so when it comes down to it, in most programs, the coaches are still the primary evaluators, yet no one actually knows when they're hired if they're any good at scouting. And so I just don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. I think coaching in itself is a all-encompassing 24-hour-a-day job. You throw in recruiting, which is a huge differentiator in college football versus professional football. That's not going anywhere. Recruiting is still incredibly important. It's changed. And I think you need to evolve your recruiting function and spend an allocation of time. But coaches, between recruiting and coaching and developing players, especially with a smaller roster, that's only more important. And then to also be primary evaluators and narrowing these lists, and it's just too much. It's from a workload perspective, quality of life, horrible
No doubt.
in college. So even just on that basics, it all is going to evolve. I think there's a pace at which it's going to go. I have no control over the pace. I'm going to be patient. I'm in this for the long game. I'm trying to help solve problems. I'm not here to grift and take advantage of a super inefficient, low-hanging fruit type of world that it's in right now. But when these teams realize that they can gain a lot of ground by being smarter, that's where I want to help and I want to partner with schools.
Let me last question, Jake, just to pivot a little bit so you can share with our listeners. So the draft's just over a week away, and obviously if you can put on your old NFL hat without talking anything specific about the Eagles or any organization for that matter, why don't you share with everybody kind of what goes on the week or weeks leading up to the draft from a personnel scouting standpoint, the second guessing, or just how things are done and the craziness that goes on leading up to the draft?
Yeah, I think I only know one way. I was fortunate enough to be with one team my entire NFL career, but I think it's a little bit of chaos that kind of crescendos and then turns to calm because all the hay is in the barn. You know, I can't imagine if you're scrambling right down to the last second, that's a sign of good process. I think one thing about where I worked and the way Howie operated is you understand, like, the bulk of the work is done over the course of the season and way before the draft. And you're just really kind of filling in blanks and really fine-tuning certain things. But you shouldn't be making big changes. You shouldn't be having like these aha moments within the last week of the draft. I really think it comes down to details. For me, I always oversaw the undrafted free agent process, which is another way of describing the chaos that goes on after the draft, where once the last pick of the last round is made, every team is allowed to sign every player who wasn't drafted. And as you know, Hadley, that is just bedlam. So that was where I would spend a lot of this last week, is trying to make some sense of that with coaches and understanding where our priorities were going into that process. Because, you know, that's where you can make up some ground here in this week in terms of relationships and laying, some of that in advance. But big picture, for most of these NFL teams, you're getting a little bit of last color on players, but your board really is pretty much where it is. I think most teams are just going through, some strategy type exercises, whether they're doing mock drafts, and they're really just trying to understand, if this happens, what do we do? Because, like we always said, clear head and clear times. It's like these are the times where you should be going through everything that could possibly happen. So when you're on the clock, those aren't the first time. If that's the first time you've discussed any of these options, you've failed.
Yeah. Jake, it's a fascinating transition, and as the college game continues to evolve, it's going to get bigger and bigger. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Continue. Good luck.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Jake.
Man, appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Yep, there's Jake Rosenberg from the Athlete Group. All right, coming up, the business of Rory. It's a good one to be in. We'll talk about that next. All right, we continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley and Matt. Again, I'll remind you guys, please subscribe to the pod. We're available on any and every podcast platform. New episodes will drop each Friday. You can also watch us on that mighty 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, Hadley, let's talk about the Masters. It wrapped up after what was a disappointing ratings result in the first round, where the ratings were down 28%, which is the post-Tiger effect. We had a great finish, and that was due to Rory nearly cagging away the Masters and a big push by Justin Rose, which led to a playoff. The Masters final round averaged 12.7 million viewers on CBS, the most watched golf telecast on any network in 7 years. So it was a big boon there. And the way Rory won just adds to the legacy of Rory now with the Grand Slam, the career Grand Slam. But I wanted to ask you more about some of the stuff off the course for him. So he's got the 28 PGA Tour titles. He's got the 5 majors. I didn't realize he is the Symphony Ventures co-founder. He's co-founder of Tomorrow Sports. He started at least the process with TGL. He's earned over $100 million on the PGA Tour. So the Rory business is booming.
And by the way, it has been booming. And let me answer this question twofold. Number one, as a fan, one of the most exciting Masters in recent memory. It was, I don't know anyone who didn't watch it. I had my brothers who are not golf fans getting into Sunday's matchup and watching the whole thing unfold, and just the DeChambeau, the Live Tour versus the PGA Tour, his fall, Oberg and his at the end. Maybe it was exciting, and then the whole thing with Rory and Justin Rose, who led early and then faulted, came back day 4, and look what happened. So as a fan, it was amazing drama and great sports. On the business side, people fail to realize, first of all, Rory's only 35 years old. Yeah. It's not like he's in his late 40s, hasn't been on the course for that long. he was a prodigy. I mean, he was the talk of the town when he came onto the tour and is now in an elite fraternity. I mean, he is only the 6th golfer to win every major and only the 2nd in the last 50 years, the other being Tiger Woods. So he's in a class by himself. Now on the business side of things, because of all the things he's done, and people don't realize it, he's been involved behind the scenes, really growing the sport, stayed loyal to the PGA Tour. He could have been the highest paid live golfer had he chose to go down that road. The companies he's involved with, the organizations he's involved with, the partnering with Tiger Woods, the business of Rory McIlroy is booming. And now after this win, it's only going to get larger because he is the face of the PGA Tour along with Scottie Scheffler. But Rory has this longer history and Scottie's kind of newer on the scene. And so I just think it's great for the sport and it's great for Rory and his team.
Let me add for Rory winning the Masters. So he gets a record $4.2 million in prize money, which sounds odd to say. It's kind of a drop in the bucket for him. But he also gets the green jacket, which we know, an honorary membership to Augusta National, a gold medal and a replica Masters trophy, a lifetime invitation to the Masters. He gets a personal locker in the Champions locker room, access to the members-only driving range, and an annual invitation to the Champions Dinner, all things that Hadley Engelhart also has. So
sure,
you'll be seeing Rory at those things on an annual basis.
Let me add to that, by the way. I don't know if you saw the video of him going to the Champions locker room.
Yep.
I thought it was very genuine. I thought he was humble. He's very appreciative. And I think, obviously he wanted to win the Masters. And I think in talking to some agents on the golf side, everyone talks about all the majors. If you really talk to them and ask them the same question, they may not say it on air, of the 4 majors, which is the most important one to you, especially American golfers.
Agreed.
They would all say the Masters.
He feels like the granddaddy, yeah.
It is.
Yep.
And so you are in that elite fraternity, so it's good for Rory and good for his team of people.
All right, one last story, and this is not exactly the light way to go out, but Fox Sports looks like they're going to try to reach a settlement. Remember the story involving their executive Charlie Dixon, on-air personality Skip Bayless and Joy Taylor. They're in settlement talks with a former hairstylist over what was called a bombshell lawsuit. At the time in January, the hairdresser accused Charlie Dixon, the exec, and Skip Bayless of harassing her. Bayless of offering her $1.5 million at the time to have sex with her. And Joy Taylor then got caught up in the middle of the Charlie Dixon stuff because there was allegations of her and Charlie Dixon, her and another co-host, that somehow maybe led to her getting a position, maybe not the way that you would say you earned it. So we're talking about settlements here. We're talking about, some financial agreement. This is, you're going to sign paperwork. You're not going to talk about this moving forward. And then it kind of quietly goes away. Is that the hope?
Yeah. I mean, listen, this is a PR nightmare for all the parties included. And anytime you fight something in the public eye, it's a losing battle. Because no matter if you win the case or not, if it affects your PR, it affects what you do marketing-wise, you lose. And so the smarter way to do it, unfortunately, is to settle this with non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements, and everybody moves on. And unfortunately, as long as your business partner, in this case ESPN, is on board with it.
Fox.
Fox is on board with it, then it's a win-win. And it stinks that we're talking about this, but this is the world. We're in a litigious world, and right or wrong, whether something happened or not, we're never going to probably know what really went on. It's going to end up being pushed under the rug, and it'll be talked about for a little bit, and then we're going to move on into more important things.
Welcome to corporate America.
Amen.
No. All right. I'll remind you guys, if you would please subscribe to the podcast, just search out Deals and Deadlines. You can find it on any podcast platform. You can also watch us on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel with new episodes each and every Friday. Thanks to Sneezing Bella, our producer, and thanks to you guys for spending your day with us. We'll talk to you next time on Deals and Deadlines.